and we're going to be talking about aligning product and team objectives with UX. So welcome back, Carmen and Mackenzie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the things that has come up in pretty much all of these talks is that there might be a kind of an appetite for UX to focus on the customer, and then there's always the competing business tension of just trying to get new features out and just get something done. So I saw a study recently where they asked PMs, product managers, and UX people what their roles were. And there was a massive, I think there was like an 80% overlap in what people said they were responsible for. So if I take Marty Kagan's kind of view where he talks about product and he doesn't really mention UX separately, he says product is responsible for desirability and viability. But is UX responsible for the desirability with the research? So what is, in your view, and maybe Carmen, I'll start with you, and just how do you structure it, and what is the role boundary between product and UX within your organization?
Yeah, we partner really closely. So one of the things that we've done at Handshake is we partner really closely with them to quarterly plan our research initiatives. So we are, I would say, for a startup especially, we operate pretty strategically, which is great because we're able to really get a sense of where the company is trying to go, what we're trying to accomplish in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months, in the next 1 year. And then the benefit of being able to do that is, especially as UX researchers, we can plan pretty far ahead. And one of the things that we really try to do is do our research, especially when we're talking about more discovery type of research, do it at least 1 or 2 quarters ahead of time. And so as long as we have, which we do, which is great, understanding of where the business is trying to go, then we can align our work to, I would say sometimes it may end up telling the business like, hey, we need to shift gears, but that's okay. And sometimes it's in support, I should say, of the business objectives. But as long as we're working ahead and we understand the business objectives, we can really come to them with insights. And I think Mackenzie and I both have been pretty successful in that, and our insights being used and being able to be used to influence product roadmap.
Great. So just to kind of summarize and recap, so you have product who are being very strategic and giving kind of guidance on where the direction is going. So you're kind of being able to research ahead of time on that? Would that be?
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, of a partnership. So we may do research to influence product and influence product strategy. They may also come to us with things that they have. So I think it's a partnership. It's not necessarily they're only defining the roadmap. They are definitely doing a lot of the leadership in that regards, but our insights are being used to influence the direction and product strategy and the work that they do. But it really is a partnership. It's us working really closely with them, understanding their business objectives, as I mentioned before, asking great questions, working with them, understanding what do we know, what do we don't know. If we move forward with this feature, do we know enough in order to be able to move forward and make that decision? And if we don't, how can we partner closely with them to help get those answers to those questions?
Great, thanks. And I guess just Laurie, would you be able to kind of share in your context what is the role of product in UX and how is that structured in Optum?
It's in how it's structured within Optum. So it's a real partnership because, you know, if you can get everybody engaged throughout the entire software development lifecycle, and definitely in in that research, that portion of research, setting that up, and understanding what it's going to take to really infuse accessibility into the process, because you can't. you really, if you delay accessibility till later, it's frustrating. If you delay UX till later, it's frustrating. And, and product, they've got that insight that lends itself to what are you really trying to accomplish? And so you kind of can't have any one without the other, right? So it's got to have a very, very strong foundation and relationship. So the most that you can, the more that you can do, the better to keep that communication strong and early.
Excellent. So I just want to jump back to I'm thinking of Scott's talk earlier where he was saying you can't define a roadmap very strictly because you're going to learn as you go and you're going to find out that things that you had assumed are incorrect. So how do you, and maybe Mackenzie, if you want to take this, we'll give Carmen a break, just on if you're planning out and you're doing all of your research ahead of time in line with your strategic goals, what happens when things start shifting and you start learning that things are different?
Yeah, I love this question because I think I used to work pre-UX, pre even knowing what those two beautiful letters meant together. I worked as a sustainability consultant where we traditionally, the shortest strategic plan I ever did for a client was 50 years. And I did up to 250-year plans for roadmaps. The sustainability space is incredibly comfortable with things will change, we will learn more. And then I went and I moved back into tech and I was working in 2-week agile sprints. It was like moving to another country, another culture. And so I've always felt extremely comfortable that because we put something on a slide, because we put something on a spreadsheet, because we put a visual roadmap to something, it's not set in stone. Literally, I can change a slide so easy, watch me. But I do try to have empathy with my stakeholders, knowing like not everyone comes from that perspective and things can feel like fire and things can change. But there's a lot of work that I try to do. I will say like Handshake, as Carmen said, is one of the most strategic places I've ever worked, even for a small company. And so when she says we're doing research in line with the business strategy, we're doing research on assumptions made in the business strategy. And I think the business, because Carmen set up this incredible air cover and expectation setting around what we are prepared to find, for the most part, they are ready for us to come back with new information on assumptions we made. And I was in a really powerful meeting this week. I left individual feedback with a VP who I think like landed a plane of people being very stressed that the roadmap seemed to be getting off. And he said, I hear we learned something new. I want to like congratulate everyone in the room for learning something new. And it sounds like we need to change the roadmap. And that was like, I just didn't want to let that moment go unnoticed because I think like we get very obsessed that we're like, we put it, but we wrote it down. And I just want to say to everyone, like we can't not, just because it will change is not a reason not to do it. We do it to learn, and then going through that ritual of changing the roadmap and learning from what we've learned is the practice. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I really like acknowledging to this group is roadmaps change. It's not a reason not to do them and not to believe in them and do our best. It's a balance between you can put things down, you can go explore them, you can learn, and you can shift.
Great, and you kind of touched on one of the challenges that I've seen in some places, and it comes back to culture, I guess. It's in places where they're very much, we'll do a big project and we'll plan it out and we'll do it all. And then the most important thing is scope management. You want to avoid scope creep. To then you're kind of flipping it on its head and you're saying, no, if we learn something new, we have to take it on board and we have to adjust. So I've seen that very difficult from a personal perspective, that people really can't handle that because they're saying it's kind of like, who moved my cheese? You were telling me to do this and now the next day you're telling me to do something else. So I guess it's an open question. Have you found that in your organizations, and how have you dealt with that? So does anybody want to volunteer to take that one on before I nominate somebody?
I can talk about that a little bit. So, usually, sometimes when I come onto a project, accessibility is new to the project and to the team members. And some, you don't get a good star that's really, really inclusive designer or whatever, but you know, moving that, you know, changing that mindset is, you know, you have to kind of try and make things open. All right, and now I've forgotten the original question.
No, it was about if you're kind of moving from a culture where it's very fixed to a culture where
Yes.
it's kind of let's learn and iterate. Some people can find that very challenging because they prefer having it very, tell me what to do and I'll go do that, and you keep changing the priorities on me.
Right. And so I'm usually people see me coming, you know, from accessibility, and they're like, "Oh no, now we got to do everything boring, you know, and I got to change this beautiful design that we've come up with." And so like, no, this is great. And I like to, you know, reiterate what you were saying, Mackenzie, is that, you know, change is good. And so you learn these opportunities, you know, that I wouldn't have thought of before when you start to open up to that change. And you know, it's nice to have sometimes that longer term vision. I like what you're talking about 250 years from now, right? Because that allows you to pivot a little bit more and have a little bit more room to you know, to go in a slightly different approach. Okay, we're going to go around the rocks now, but we're still going to be able to get to Canada eventually, right? So it's that flexibility is hard to learn, but so you know, always be gentle, always have that gentle approach and that curiosity everybody's been talking about on this on these calls today.
Excellent. Anything to add, Carmen or Mackenzie? No. I'll move on to another question, because there's one that I always love. It's the beefy kind of product versus kind of UX, and I touched on it in Laurie's questions. What happens when there's a business focused decision that is not good for users, that it's going to make money, but it's not necessarily a great thing for the users? What happens in that case, or have you experienced that? And then how do you handle that? So maybe I'll start with Carmen on this one.
Yeah, that I have. That is hard. I think that's why I talk about, when we talk about sensitivity and empathy in the presentation that we gave, that sensitivity piece of it is so important. And so what I like to do in those situations is embed researchers working directly and closely with the product teams as much as possible, and start to develop empathy for our users and for our customers. The other thing is to help them, or what I've done in the past is sometimes the monetary benefit of things doesn't align with customer satisfaction, and you may see NPS go down. So understanding what your and we can have a long discussion about NPS, okay? So I don't want to get into that. But what I do want to call out is understanding what your company measures and using that also within the conversation. So they are going to, revenue is a huge part of our metrics. It's part of, you know, how a business defines success. But the other piece of that is customer satisfaction. So where can you pull those in? Where can you pull that from? Whether it's us as researchers, whether it's support. I've also used support for that, really partnering really closely with our support team, understanding tickets, how many tickets, getting them access to the tool that support uses so they can go and they can see all the support tickets. So really, yeah, I think empathy is the best way of doing that, because it can be a challenge, and I've experienced that a couple of times in my career.
Great. And one of the things, I'm thinking back to some personal experience. I don't know if there's an airline in Europe that's very famous for low cost, and that's their whole thing. They're a costs kind of conscious carrier, but in some ways they're antagonistic towards their customers. Like they try and make things difficult. So there was an example where they started, if you don't buy a seat, they will separate you. if you book multiple people. So fantastic for the business because more people are paying for seats now, they're making more money. But obviously it's a negative on the customer satisfaction because they know that if I book 2 people or my family or something, I'm going to have to buy the seats in order to sit together. But to that company, because that is what they're known for, and people don't care because they've got the price leadership. What do you do in a situation like that? Or have you an experience where you're working in either UX, or it could be that same argument could be made for accessibility, that we don't really care. So how do you deal with that when the business are kind of saying, look, it's not that important to us?
I have a thought
Mackenzie,
on that. I have a thought on that. I mean, I think that one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from a fellow researcher in an applied space is like, don't delude yourself to think you're doing magical work outside of the work of a business. We work for the business, and by working here, I share some of the values and culture that the business has put their stake in the ground. And so to me, I think that I think I know the airline you're referring to, but has put their stake in the ground that like what they value above all else is cost-cutting measures, and even almost, I don't know if they sit around having ideas about how to be antagonistic, because that sounds intentional. I got my MBA, and one of my favorite case studies we ever did was around an airline in the US. Southwest Airlines is really simple. It started in sort of the Southwest. And what I found was so fascinating is when they did the market research around it, they said, we are not competing with airlines, we're competing with bus travel. We're only going to fly as far as bus travel, and we're going to treat people like they're on a bus. So people will file in, people will move by number. And to this day, I grew up flying Southwest. The people are hilarious. The people that greet you and seat you and take care of you are funny, and they do training in all sorts of like caring things, but they funnel you in like cattle and they funnel you out like cattle. And people who did not grow up flying like that on United and other things, they get despicable. I will not be treated like a cow when I fly. I find it delightful. And so I think I would, if I went and worked for this company you're referring to, like remembering, I can try to make an individual difference and organize at a low level and manage up the best I can and to change, but that I do by working under an umbrella that big and a culture that strong, co-own the values. And so I would be hard pressed to go take a job there and say, I'm going to single-handedly make us treat our users better. Because it sounds like we almost even have like antagonize our users in our values. And so I don't know if that's the answer, but it sounds kind of built into the DNA. And I would hesitate to individually fight that fight.
Yeah, I love this subject, by the way. I don't know if Mackenzie knows this, because I have talked so much about dark patterns in UX. We know that they are everywhere. And I do think, I'm pretty passionate about this subject because I do think that we, as UX professionals, there are some ethics that we should hold ourselves accountable to. Of some values, whatever that is, what are values and what are ethics. I will say that I have experience at a company where we had things probably shouldn't have been the way it was. I don't think it was done on purpose, but I was able to see change in that company. It took a while, it took years, but they did make change. And I think if you work anywhere in UX now today, chances of you finding a dark pattern is probably, unfortunately, high. But how you can, one of the things, what I just speak to Handshake a minute, that I love about Handshake is when you can set values early on in the early stages of the company of things that you're not going to do. Like, we're not going to do that. And you can get everyone to align around those values, then that's pretty powerful. And you can use user research in order to do that too.
Excellent. No, I love that topic because there is no right answer in some businesses. I think it makes sense if that's their model. They actually, some businesses are all about customer kind of loyalty and success and happiness. And maybe if you're a price leader, you don't need happiness as much as you've got the cheapest price. Sorry.
I was just going to add, because I was thinking of, okay, so there's the dark patterns, and I'm also trying to think of a more positive one. So, Balsamic, that the mock-up software, right? Low fidelity. For the longest time, they didn't update their prices, and people were asking for more and more features. And they're like, no, we want to stay within this price range. And if we start to add in feature after feature after feature, then we won't be able to stay within that that price range. So that was, they stuck to their values in a positive way, I think, right? But alienated some users, and they were like, we're okay with that because this stays true to who we are, and how we want to, in our value system.
Excellent, great point. So coming back to like aligning kind of team objectives. So you convince somebody, you've got a great product partner, and they're saying, okay, let's do this. But the skills or what techniques do we use? How do you help coach kind of people who, yes, you've got them bought in, but maybe there aren't enough, so everybody's talking about there aren't enough designers and researchers to the development team. So maybe some of the teams want to take on some of this stuff themselves. Do you have any tips for how to upskill them or train people to help them adopt? Laurie, I guess with accessibility, this is a big one.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So it's a big, wild world out there in terms of learning about accessibility. And so, when I'm on a team, where it's newer and I'm coaching, then I will, start with that why, and then, guide them to any resource I possibly can that addresses that why. Maybe I've got a brother that has a disability, or I'm neurodivergent or whatever. Okay, cool. Let's build on that need. I'm a developer and I want to augment my skill set. So okay, great. I've got so many resources that I can set you up with. And basically I just want to build on what is motivating them already. And then I'm like, okay, here's the tools that I'm going to point you towards, and leverage any sort of stories that I can, because those are really powerful in again, getting towards that motivation. Because if I can get them towards curiosity again, they're going to start to do it themselves. So motivation is the beginning of that journey.
Excellent. And would that be similar for, I guess, some of the research things? Like, I don't know the structure, but usually when I talk to people, there's more research than there are people, and they wish they could just be doing more. So I've talked to a lot of companies where they're starting to do a train the team model. Is that something you're looking at Handshake, or are you kind of centralizing your research? Mackenzie?
All right, I might let you take it, Carmen, as the head, but I can chime in on things I'm excited about.
Okay, sure, yeah. So Mackenzie, so we maybe we both could take it, Mackenzie, because you are working on the training. So Mackenzie and I are partnering really closely together to help train, especially our designers and product managers, so that they can run their own research. And I'll let Mackenzie talk a little bit about some of the things that she's been putting together. But we have set up, most of you might be familiar with user-testing.com, for example, and we have templates in place where designers are able to go in and run their own research with support of us. We have set up 1 hour a week where actually Mackenzie leads this, I'll let her talk about it, where they can come to her with any questions if they need help setting up user-testing.com. And we have several people on our team that can actually interview pretty well. Some of them gained that skill set before we even came to the company because there was no researchers. Other ones are learning that skill set through support and help with us. We do have a deck that we give to people before they interview anyone of like, here's how to not ask leading questions, and good tips about like paraphrasing and things of that sort. So we do have a deck around that. But I'll let Mackenzie talk because she's been doing a lot in this regard too. So
Thank you, Carmen. Yeah, I think that a big thing in our charter was that, and that helped me make the decision to join Handshake, was Carmen believed in the democratization of research. As someone who not that long ago like was on the outside and found my way in, I think there are a lot of skills that you can leverage and deepen. And so I think we have a research prioritization and roadmap that we make really clear, like incoming requests, what we're working on, and which are prioritized, and we track what we say no to. I think that is really, really big. I think people are so focused on like, look how much we do, even though we're limited. It's kind of neat to flip the script and say like, what did we say no to and why? We were working on the most important things. In that model, I think Carmen just sort of referenced, we work with full engagement, and that is where like at Handshake, Carmen and I think have been working on the most foundational and generative projects. And then we are in support roles frequently for those more evaluative requests. So we're working on templates and a training, I think very designer centric at this point for running more usability studies. We want designers to be empowered to test and get feedback on their own designs. But we have a lot of, as Carmen said too, people who have the ability to run interviews. And I think what we're trying to do, you referenced this earlier, Rory, of this overlap of like what do PMs do and what do UXers do. And I really want to be humble and say like, I can do a lot, but why am I here? Why am I a researcher? Here are the places that the magic is here. And I really want to be involved at these places. And I want to support and upskill you so you can run the rest very, very autonomously. But know to bring me in here. And I'm not trying to be a blocker. I'm not trying to slow you down. So getting really clear on crafting research questions, crafting scripts. I worked in a previous model at my previous organization where I would, talk about objectives, co-craft research questions, write up a guide. I would run the first session. They would note take. This person would run the second session. I would note take. And I said, if you're going to work with me like this, I need you to be really open to full and transparent feedback and direct critique at the end of that. And then you can run the rest. And so just really working in a model where like trust that I am coming in with expertise in certain areas. I'm here to empower you and do more. And this is to ensure that we have a high level of structure and research and rigor in what we output. And then we can really, trust everything that we're doing and share and compare. I think I had one last thought on that, but I might have talked myself out of remembering it. So I don't know. I'm very excited that people can do and engage in this way, because Carmen and I are the mighty team of two. We are definitely not 1-to-1, 1-to-2, or anywhere near that. But I think we're working on the biggest, meatiest things, and we're really trying to be very inclusive, while not handing away our expertise, saying anyone can do what we do, but we're really trying to be picky and choosy about where we contribute the most, and we hope you include us in that spot.
I want to add to that, because I think that that's such a huge point, right? That trust, and that, that trust in your expertise and vice versa, right? If I'm working with a designer and like, wow, I building on a concept of behavioral design, right? So how I want to manipulate, in the nicest possible way, manipulate my user into doing more fitness activities, for example, then, I'm like, here, okay, how can we support this for all of our users, right? And all of the members who are participating in this app. So, okay, all right. So if you're emphasizing, I only have a couple things left to go in my step journey today, then great, let's do that. And let's make sure that everybody is hearing that first, right? If I'm using a screen reader, or if I'm, whatever. So it's that, combination of awesome where we're working together and leveraging each other's expertise. Trust.
Yeah,
it's good.
I love it. I'm going to add more to this conversation. One of the things also with us coming to the team as UX researchers, they only had like the marketing team. So a lot of the work the research that was being done, it was being done by the marketing team. So a lot of us coming along is like, well, what does UX research do? And they're like, well, how is that different from what the marketing team is doing? but it's actually working out super well. We're partnering with them, and we're helping one of the other person, the product marketing manager, who also conducts research. She's a marketing researcher too. We are working on like a way of educating the business. Like, here are the ways that they will contribute, and here are the ways that UX research will contribute. And the beautiful thing about that is people are starting to see it, and we're going to be able to expose that more and do a lunch and learn. But it's really a partnership. And I think McKinsey talked a lot about it. As long as we're not in that battle mindset and we're working together, I think we are way more successful.
Excellent. I might invite you back to share about your UX and marketing experience at a later date, because that's really interesting overlap as well. Well, thank you very much. We're out of time, but thank you, Carmen, Mackenzie, and Laurie. That was a really great chat. So to kind of summarize, there are overlaps, but it's all about kind of everybody's bringing a slightly different skill set to the team and trying to get that kind of balance going. And I did like the kind of train and democratize, I think was the word you used. That's a great approach. And team topologies, I'm not sure if you've read that book, but they talk about enabling teams. So I think that's a great way of, like, the enabling teams help the other teams to deliver. So that's all we have time for. So thank you very much, and thank you for sharing your insights.